Hi, mabuhay! My name is Ayana Shane Emersal, a first-year college student taking the program Bachelor of Science in Hospitality Management. And this is my last project in macro perspective of tourism and hospitality. Table of contents. First, we have travel and tourism in different eras. Second, history of travel and tourism in the Philippines. But first, let us know what is hospitality and tourism first. Hospitality. The term hospitality predates the use of the word tourism. It is derived from the Latin word hospes, which encompasses the words host, guest, and stranger. Now let's proceed to tourism. Tourism. The word tourism first appeared in an Oxford English dictionary in 1811. Other dictionaries suggest that it was derived from a Greek word for a tool used in describing a circle. In a sense, tourism intrinsically involves a circular itinerary where tourists return to their point of origin. Others also suggest that it came from the word Hebrew word Torah, which means studying, searching, and learning. Now, let us take a look at the status of travel and tourism from the ancient days. Early tourism. Exploration and travel are essential to humans. People have been traveling even before the concept of tourism was developed. People in the past traveled only for business and religious purposes. History tells us that merchants traveled extensively to trade products. When the Sumerians invented the money, the cuneiform writing, and the wheels, the trading industry flourished. Now let's tackle the importance of knowing the history of travel and tourism. The importance of knowing the history of travel and tourism. History provides important insights into the reasons for travel and the eventual development of tourism. Based on early records, we know that many cultures and nations moved great armies and navies to conquer and control resources and trade routes. Early recorded history provides a glimpse into ancient tourism activities. The Phoenicians, like many travelers, were interested in travel because of a sense of curiosity and discovery as well as a means of establishing trade routes. Although written records are scarce, other peoples such as the Mayans on the Gulf Coast of what is now Mexico and the Shang dynasty in what is now present-day China probably traveled for many of the same reasons as the Phoenicians. Evidence of their travels can be found in the artifacts they collected during their journeys to faraway places. One thing we know for sure is that as civilizations became established and spread geographically, travel became a necessity. And now, let's proceed to the travel and tourism in different eras. Romans and Greeks. Romans and Greeks were well-known traders in the past, and as their empire grew, travel became necessary for them. The improvement in first-class roads, inns, and communications aided the Roman travelers. One of the best roads in Rome, Appian Way, perhaps it is the oldest road that still exists. It was one of the ancient Rome's significant military and economic road. The Romans also employed relays of horses, and every 6 miles a stable could be found where travelers could change horses. Because of this, distance of more than 100 miles could be reached in one day. Leisure travel existed already, but it was not yet widespread. It was only limited to a few and affluent families, like Greeks who traveled to witness the Olympic Games, which was first held in 776 BC, and Romans who traveled for pleasure and to visit friends and relatives. Second, we have religious. Religious travels were in the form of pilgrimages to places of worship. The cities of Rome and Jerusalem were the famous sites for pilgrims in the past. Now let's tackle about medieval. Medieval period travel declined. Travel, derived from the word travail, became burdensome, dangerous, and demanding during this time. After the decline of the Roman Empire in the 5th century, roads were not maintained and they became unsafe. Thieves inflicted harm on those who dared to travel. No one during this time traveled for pleasure. Crusaders and pilgrims were the only ones who traveled. Tourism in the Renaissance and Elizabethan era. In this period, few renowned universities were developed. The British introduced travel for education, which became popular in the 16th century. During the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, young aristocrat men who were aiming for a position in court were encouraged to travel within the continent to increase their knowledge. Gradually, the practice was adapted by other men on a lower scale. The education of a gentleman should be completed with a grand tour. The tour includes visiting different cultural centers on the continent for 3 years. Though expressed as an educational activity, the Grand Tour became more of social business. Pleasure-seeking young men traveled predominantly in France and Italy to enjoy European cultures and social life. Venice, Florence, and Paris became the key attractions at the time. Grand Tour was institutionalized for the upper class in the later part of the 18th century. Aside from educational travel, people also traveled for health and wellness. Sick people traveled and sought for a remedy for their illnesses in medical baths or spa, a term which is derived from the word spa, which means fountain. Entertainment was added, and many of the watering places became a resort hotel. Baths in France, Italy, Bohemia became fashionable in the 18th and 19th centuries. Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution brought significant changes in the type and scale of tourism development. Aside from technological changes, it brought social changes that made travel more desirable. The increase in productivity, job regularization, and growing urbanization give workers time and more motivation to go on a holiday. People at this time usually go to countryside or seashore. It led to the creation of working-class resorts near major industrial hubs. 19th century. The advancement of technology made travel more convenient, and in the earlier part of the 19th century, the railway system and the steam power were introduced. This advancement in technology made travel more convenient and comfortable. The new means of transport increased transport carrying capacity and reduced travel cost. Initially, the railway was not created to promote travel and tourism. However, during the mid-19th century, the railway system provided a convenient and comfortable transport service for pleasure travelers. Photography and instructional materials such as guidebooks and travelogues became popular. Among the guidebooks printed, the Baedeker guidebooks were the most popular because it does not only contain basic information, but it also includes details on how to visit the destination and suggested tourist attractions that are worth visiting. In the later years of the 19th century, tourism became more organized and it became an institution. Cox and Kings was the first known travel agency, but they only catered to the travel needs of the British Royal Armed Forces. And in 1841, Thomas Cook opened the first leisure travel agency, the Thomas Cook and Sons, to help Britons improve their lives by seeing the world. 20th century. The development of the travel and tourism industry has been interrupted at several critical points in history, including World War I and World War II. During World War I, tourism became stagnant, but after the war, the demand for international travel increased, and a large-scale migration occurred. New forms of mass communication such as the cinema, radio, and television have increased people's curiosity and broadened their knowledge and interest in travel. There was also a decline in railway travel caused by the introduction of the automobile. Seaside tours became popular. led by improved motorized public transport and road conditions. World War II led to an increase in travel interest influenced by the advancement in aircraft technology. Air travel became more comfortable and faster compared to other forms of transport. In 1958, Boeing 707 jet was introduced and the air travel for masses began, which brought a decline of sea travel. 21st century. At the start of the century, global events like September 11, 2001, World Trade Center, New York City bombing, the war in Iraq, terrorist attacks, and health scares hit a decline in international travels. The century also brought a massive technological transformation as the increase in internet usage revolutionized travel services. In 2000s, online travel bookings multiplied exponentially, and in 2014, global leader Expedia expanded to include brands such as Hotels.com, Trivago, Hotwire Group, and Expedia Cruise Ship Centers. And now, let's proceed to the history of travel and tourism in the Philippines. Spanish occupation. During the Spanish occupation, travels were limited only to education, employment, and religious pilgrimage. Only a few people can travel to a foreign country because it was expensive and time consuming. For example, traveling to Spain could take 1 year via the Manila Acapulco Galeon trade route. In the later part of the 19th century, Spaniards introduced innovations such as railroads, electricity, and telegraph. Manila was opened to world trade, and non-Spanish businesspeople, diplomats, and seamen began visiting the city. In 1889, Hotel de Oriente, the city's first deluxe hotel, was opened, but it was replaced with a more modern hotel during the American occupation. American occupation. During the celebration of American independence on July 4, 1912, the Americans opened the Manila Hotel, which became the city's landmark. Americans did mineral exploration in the country's mountainous regions. They transformed the remote rural town of Baguio into a city. Because of its cold temperature, it became a popular destination, especially during summer. In the first half of the 20th century, there were still few foreign visitors, but their travel was confined in the country's capital city, and the main point of entry, the Manila city. The journey from America to Manila usually took 2 weeks by ocean liner, but when Pan American Airways launched Pan American Clippers, the travel time was reduced. In 1935, the first Trans-Pacific flight was inaugurated. Americans reached Manila Harbor in just 59 hours aboard the China Clippers. In 1937, the country's first private airport was established. It is where the country's first airline, the Philippine Airlines, took its first flight in 1941. And now let's tackle about the earliest tourism organization in the country. In 1952, the country's first tourism association was organized. The Philippine Tourist and Travel Association (PTTA) is an association of all existing travel establishments that serves domestic and international travelers. The government recognized the potential of tourism and funded the association to promote the country's tourist industry. In 1956, the government, through RA 1478, created the Board of Travel and Tourist Industry (BTTI). It was a policy-making body that supervises, regulates, and controls the tourist industry. In 1973, the BTTI was reorganized into the Ministry of Tourism, now known as the Department of Tourism. Awareness for tourism grew, and Filipinos saw a respectable career in tourism. In 1977, the University of the Philippines offered the first tourism degree course in the country. In 1974, Department of Tourism hosted international conferences and sporting events such as the Miss Universe Beauty Pageant, the World Bank International Monetary Fund meeting, and the Ellie Fraser Trela in Manila boxing match respectively. In 1989, DOT launched its first promotional campaign with the slogan Fiesta Island, Philippines. In the 1990s, local civil aviation boosted tourism in the country when budget airlines entered the business, and more provincial airports were opened to international flights. This accelerated tourism and provinces on Boracay Island became a famous international resort destination. In 2000, the celebration of a public holiday was moved to the nearest weekend, creating a 3-day holiday break or long weekends that gave Filipinos more time to travel around the country. In 2010, tourism in the country faced three major crises. First was the criticism of the marketing campaign Pilipinas Kay Ganda. Many criticized the use of Filipino language in the slogan, as it might not be recognized in international markets, while others criticized the design for it resembles Poland's tourism organization's logo. The campaign was pulled out weeks after it was launched and the tourism secretary was replaced. Secondly, all Philippines carriers were banned from flying over European airspace because they failed to meet the international safety standards, and at the time, the Philippine Civil Aviation Authority cannot provide the necessary safety oversight. Dutch carrier KLM was the only airline that operated between the Philippines and Europe. The ban limited the number of European visitors until it was lifted in 2015. And lastly was the hostage-taking incident at the Carino Grandstand when a police officer held a busload of tourists from Hong Kong hostage. The mishandled rescue operation was broadcast as live around the world, and the reputation of the Philippines suffered. And lastly, the conclusion. The history of travel and tourism has significantly shaped the present industry. Early exploration and trade routes laid the groundwork, while the Industrial Revolution and transportation advancement increased accessibility. The rise of mass tourism in the 20th century led to both economic benefits and environmental concerns. Today, digital technologies influence how people plan and experience trips, emphasizing sustainability and cultural exchange. Understanding this evolution helps navigate current challenges and opportunities in the dynamic tourism landscape. And that's all. Thank you for listening. Mabuhay!